I mean, the WRX sells very few models because the market got saturated and people got tired of it. You could buy
Yeah.
them anywhere and everywhere. And the same thing happened with electrics, although it was exasperated by the fact that this wasn't just, oh, Tesla's making a bunch of money off of these cars. Tesla's selling a bunch of electrics. Let's make an electric. No, it was Tesla's making electrics, and the government says, well, everyone should make electrics. In fact, government of California said everyone should only make electrics. And so when you have a market for something that's maybe, I don't know, 5%, 7%, where people want a product and either the manufacturer says, let's make nothing but that product, or the government says you're going to make nothing but that product. Well, then suddenly the value of that item is going to plunge.
Yeah.
And so it's just a natural thing with so many manufacturers. I mean, it was great when it was a niche, but when everyone makes electric cars, then suddenly it's not a niche and it's not even anything fancy. I mean, one of the things that a guy with a Tesla loved was he was special, just like the guy with the WRX or the guy with the Corvette, or the guy with the purple Saturn Redline Saturn Sky, whatever it was. Part of the electric car mystique was all the other cars burn gas. Mine is electric.
But there was a certain amount of exclusivity when Tesla first came out, right? They were the
Exactly.
first ones on a mass scale. You know, they certainly had a lot of support through government subsidies to get that product launched and get it into the market. But, you know, when they first launched the Model S, it was to a specific price point, six figures. And those people paid for the price of that technology to get them out on the road, et cetera. And then the
First
next big
adopters.
thing was we're going to do mass scale. We're going to build a Model 3 that's 30, 35,000, where everybody can afford it if they want one. And to your point, the government stepped in and said, we're going to regulate this and mandate this. And some of the states did, you know, a lot more mandating than others. And the OEMs to compete, you know, followed suit. So you saw I think one of the first ones I saw, you know, go all in on this was Volvo several years ago. They said by X model year, I think it was 2030, they were going to be nothing but electric. Okay.
A lot of them
There's a
did.
lot of
Jaguar made
European
that
companies
claim.
that have made
Uh,
that commitment. But you and I
General
remember,
Motors even made the
well,
claim that by
General Motors,
2035.
yeah, that's what they did. And, you know, it took General Motors till what, this model year or late last model year to come up with that $35,000 Equinox that they promised, you know, from several years ago. So what's happening is, you know, you look at Jaguar. I mean, they're basically shut down their, you know, historical legacy builds to go all in on new electric vehicles. But the
Yeah,
problem
they only
now
make
is
one
the
internal
market's
combustion
changed.
vehicle. Yeah, they only make the
Market's
F
changed,
Pace,
and especially in this country, you know. And if
but they're
that's the
backing
next,
down as well because
yeah,
the F Pace 2025 was supposed to be the last year for the Jaguar F Pace.
yeah,
There is a 2026 F Pace on the retail and the press websites.
yeah. Well, to that point, you know, again, they've had to adapt because, you know, again, you know, it's you know, if I want an EV, it's got to be my choice, not because somebody put a gun in my head to buy one. Okay. And, you know, you've got a lot of folks who are very passionate on both sides of this. So, you know, what I don't want to do is get into that, you know, ruffle any feathers. But the
Yeah,
bottom
but you
line
have
is
practical
there
considerations.
has to be practical
You have a house,
consideration.
Mike. You have a garage. You
Yeah.
could uh, perceivably get
Oh,
an
yeah.
EV. I mean, your vacations, down where you drive 1,000 miles would be somewhat disrupted.
Absolutely.
Charging infrastructure has gotten a lot better,
But it's
but think
not.
about the guy
What one
who's in
lives
a
in an apartment
condo,
complex?
yeah,
Where's he going to
apartment
charge? Or where's
complex.
she going to charge? Let's not
Yeah,
count the ladies out because there's a lot of ladies driving Model 3s. Okay.
yeah.
And they're considered some of these other vehicles. And I'll be honest with you, you know, the way my wife drives back and forth to work, most EV owners drive less than 50 miles a day. So the idea about range anxiety, it really, to their, you know, to the EV crowd, is range anxiety. It's moot. Okay, my wife drives less than 50 miles a day. She would be
If
a
that
candidate
vehicle
for
is
one.
not the only vehicle in the household.
Well, that's the point I'm going to make.
Because we have
Yeah,
a very specific thing where we are
yeah,
that occurs. I mean, if you have a Model S uh, between say May 30th and September 30th in New Orleans or anywhere on the Gulf Coast, Florida or wherever, you're not going to only have a Model S. You're also going to have something with a big gas tank, and you're going to keep the gas tank all the way top because
especially
when
during hurricane
you're
season.
yeah, when you're evacuating,
Yep,
I mean, there's the old bugaboo of, oh, if you're stranded on the highway and your EV, how you're going to run out of charge. Well, no, you're not, because if the EV doesn't move, the charge doesn't go down. But on
yeah,
the other hand, you're also going to be sweating your butt off because if you run the air conditioning in your EV, then it will die in traffic while you're waiting to
yeah.
be evacuated.
Well, all you got to do is go look at Florida from a couple of years ago. They've had two major hurricanes hit them, especially coming through the Tampa area. And the individuals who had to evacuate with their single owner household of an EV, they had problems. Okay. And then the other problem is you leave the EV behind. What happens when salt water gets into a lithium battery?
Yep, it's either done or it catches fire.
Correct. Okay.
The
And so
the
those are
sealing and everything on all those battery packs in recent days is much better. The
much
last
better, right?
mass fire we saw was it was either
Jacksonville
the,
Airport a
the
couple of
the
weeks ago,
Fisker
there was an EV.
Karmas.
No,
Yeah, one, yeah,
Jacksonville Airport a couple of weeks ago, there was a major fire where an EV exploded, caught
yep,
fire, and took out about 50 other cars. So
yes,
they're
that's the
not sure
issue.
what ignited it, but you
No,
know, um,
because EVs are actually statistically less likely to catch fire than an internal
agreed,
combustion car.
agreed.
But
These
the
things keep
problem
happening.
is, well, no, the problem is when if they do catch fire, it's
Oh
going to be
yeah,
a much worse fire, and it can't be put out by conventional means.
correct, correct. So I mean, there's challenges, and we can go on for days about some of the pro and the con.
Yeah,
Is there a market for EVs? Absolutely. And the early adopters paid a big price to have that privilege. But I used to have the philosophy about folks who were looking at that first generation Prius. It was a quirky little vehicle.
yep,
And I came up with the slogan, if I'm going to be green, I want to be seen. Because a lot of people back 10, 15 years ago, Camry made a hybrid. They couldn't sell them. Okay, looked the same as every other Camry. It
yep. Had
wasn't
a little blue
unique.
badge
And yeah, it had a little blue badge. Same thing with Honda Accord. General Motors tried to do an
in the Civic.
EV, a hybrid Sierra, and a hybrid Yukon, and a
There was
hybrid
a
Tahoe.
hybrid
Yeah,
Dodge Durango one year.
yeah.
Uh,
But the bottom line is, again, this is going back 10 to 15 years. And again, technology's advanced so much since then. But every dealership got one. And it was the oldest car of truck in the inventory because nobody really wanted it. Okay. So, but the younger folks, and I can tell you, I'd consider one, but when we were talking about this, my wife and I, the pro and the con, she drives a Buick Envision. It's about a 35,000 automobile. A comparable EV at the time was $25,000 more. Now, you take away the credit, 7,500, it made it a little closer. But
yeah,
even if gas was $5 a gallon, I can buy a lot of gas for 25 grand difference. Okay. And when gas was climbing $2, $3, $4 in some markets, that's when you saw people really say, okay, I'm going to jump into it
yep.
and test the waters. Or like Hertz did, we're going to go ahead and see if we can capitalize on this EV push. Well,
Because
it
if
didn't
Tesla
work out
hadn't
for either one of them.
yeah,
Okay.
if
It
Tesla hadn't chopped their prices down, and if they had not ordered so many of them, and if they had a lot of ifs, they could have made a reasonable revenue from renting them, and then they could have gotten, most of their money back when they sold them. But
Well, I think you made the point earlier in our conversation. When Tesla was the only game in town, they could pretty much do whatever they want and charge whatever they wanted. And the other thing that happened was Tesla's, direct to consumer sales model, they were making such high profits, over 30% on each retail sale. Well, first off, there's nowhere near that kind of profitability from the OEM to the dealer, and certainly none of that between the dealer and the consumer. And so that's why you saw, uh, General Motors wanting to do, well, Ford specifically, want to do the direct-to-consumer sale on EVs, and you saw how that blew up in their face. They had to change that, and because they got so much blowback from the dealers. Um, you know, General Motors had some issues with that as well. But they're committed to even, with the changes, Mary Bauer says, look, we're going to a large part of our portfolio. But in the early discussions, they were getting rid of all of their ICE engines. And I remember
right,
5 years ago talking to
2035,
dealers,
it was
yeah,
supposed to be
dealers had
over.
said, do they have a plan B? And they would wink and say, "Oh yeah, we got a plan B. We just can't talk about it because it wasn't politically correct to talk about it." I mean, look at the
Plus,
blowback
if
Toyota
you're,
got,
yeah,
okay? Because they said we're not jumping into EVs like everybody else. We're going to take a more measured hybrid approach. And now you see who's laughing. Okay.